Having made a protracted journey through the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th National Assemblies, the Petroleum Industry Bill 2020 was on Thursday passed by Nigeria's parliamentarians. However, its passage was not without controversy, as the House of Representatives elected to pass the bill without a debate, despite protestations by several of its members. Following its passage, both chambers will now be expected to set up a joint committee to harmonize any conflicting amendments in the bill before its presentation to President Muhammadu Buhari for his assent. Should the PIB cross the proverbial Rubicon, it will usher in a new chapter and far-reaching reforms for Nigeria's oil and gas sector. Now, here to discuss the major highlights of the PIB 2020, as well as the politics and varied interests that have impeded its passage for 13 years. Arise political editor Sumna Sambo reports.
40.
The Petroleum Industry Bill is one of the most recurrent bills in the Nigerian Parliament, spanning 13 years. It was first presented in 2008, but not passed, and when previously passed, it was not assented to until the Ninth National Assembly passed the bill again at Thursday's plenary. The new bill strengthens governance in the oil and gas industry by decentralizing the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. The new bill stops NNPC from its current role as an operator and regulator. It also provides a conducive environment for attracting investments into the petroleum and gas industry. But its passage did not happen without drama in the Senate. A joint committee of the Senate and House of Representatives had recommended that 5% be set aside for host communities, despite their earlier demand for 10% and the government's proposal of 2.5%. But at Senate plenary, host communities were allocated 3% of funds during consideration of Clause 240 of the bill. This angered senators from Niger Delta states.
No, there cannot be fund of order on this one is decided. What I'm asking for is not for me as a person, but it's for the interest of this nation. Because when we pass a good law, we must also have a good environment to implement the law. If the environment is not conducive for the implementation, we will all come back to also regret. That is my thinking.
Mr. President, this is law. This thing we are talking about is not coming to the pockets of anybody here. Everything is defined. And for the first time in all interventions in the Niger Delta region, this is the particular one that will go direct to the oil-bearing communities.
But other senators refused to buckle, while appealing to the South-South senators, and eventually the 3% was maintained as equity shareholding for host communities that will see funds directly going to them.
To now start embarking or dividing ourselves along direction and along lines and along certain fault lines that could cause division and disunity for this country, I think that is a path to Armageddon.
The idea of increasing something, we are past that stage. We had the discussions and we voted. So I will appeal that we make progress, please.
The lawmakers then went ahead to fully pass the bill, including in the House of Representatives.
I hereby move that the House do consider the report of the Ad hoc Committee on Petroleum Industry Bill on a bill for an act to provide the legal, governance, regulatory and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities and for related matters, and approve the recommendations therein.
Third reading taken and the bill is passed. We promise Nigerians that we will do our best to pass the Petroleum Industry Bill that have then so far at that time defied passage or defied assent. At least the demons have been defeated in this chamber. I want to assure the petroleum industry in Nigeria that what we have passed is a very good balance of giving them the kind of clement environment for them to not only stay here, but even bring more foreign investors into the oil and gas industry in Nigeria.
Subject to presidential assent, the new bill will also allow for 30% to go for frontier basin exploration in search of new oil fields in different states across the country. But the states were not mentioned, a move that may be deemed political. Lawmakers say the need to urgently and aggressively explore and develop new oil fields is due to fears that funding of fossil oil projects may run out in 30 years due to global quest for renewable energies. A harmonization committee will now be set up between the Senate and House of Representatives to iron out the differences in the resolutions reached by both chambers. Sumner Sambu, Arise News.
With that report there by Sumna Sambo, Arise correspondent and political editor. We're now joined by petroleum process economist, pioneer staff of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, and chairman, chief executive of International Energy Services Limited, Dr. Diran Fawibe. Good morning, Dr. Fawibe, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Ruben. How are you doing?
Thank you for joining us. Well, a lot of excitement in government circles about how the jinx around the PIB has been broken after so many years, after so many legislative efforts. But if you look at it, do you think that the bill is still useful, considering the long delay? And if you think so, how? What are those essential things that you think Nigerians need to be excited about, along with the presidency and the Senate president of Nigeria? And I asked that question because it looks like the oil and gas community had moved ahead of some of those considerations in this Petroleum Industry Bill.
Thank you very much. You see, the bill that was passed into law, even though still awaiting the presidential assent, can be said to be a move in the right direction. I wouldn't say that the petroleum industry has moved beyond the bill, because so many things were held up because of the absence of the bill, which of course has created uncertainty in the industry. When you go to some of the major oil companies in the country, they are doing practically nothing because they are waiting for this bill to be passed. The companies wanted to know what is in it for them if they make investment. And investment in Nigeria oil sector has been lacking. And it's very unfortunate that the bill has taken so many years to be passed into law. Well, but like it used to be said, better late than never. I was jokingly talking to someone yesterday that if a woman was pregnant for 13 months, normally it's 9 months. If a woman was pregnant for 9 months and beyond 9 months, 13 months, I'm taking the number of years of the bill has been in the making in terms representing in terms of months. If eventually the woman have a baby at the 13th month, there will be a relief from members of the family that at least the woman has given birth to a child. So we can rejoice that the bill has been passed into law. Now we have to take the law, the passed bill, in its stride in terms of understanding precisely what it's all about, in terms of enlightening the various stakeholders in the industry, not only the oil companies that have been following up. I believe the major oil companies, they know all these provisions, and especially the ones being amended from time to time. But the final one will now be dissected, by the oil companies, not only in Nigeria, but their home offices. So also indigenous oil companies and every stakeholder in the industry will now have to understand precisely what we have ended up in terms of the bill. The bill as it was originally conceived was to promote good governance, accountability, and transparency in the oil and gas industry. So many things have been done arbitrarily, in the past, because there were some gray areas, when a law that has been in existence for so many years, for example, the Petroleum Act that will now be repealed by this law was enacted in 1967. And when you have a legislation that has been in place for almost 5 decades, you can imagine what it will mean for the operation of the industry. And given what we are as Nigerians, where we always try to do shortcuts, you can be sure that some of the stakeholders have been on the receiving end, especially investors. So with the bill being passed into law, I believe so many things will be done in an orderly manner to promote investment in the country. It's unfortunate that we've lost a lot of investment in the years past. But in the past, some people were even saying that will Nigeria drink its oil? Because if we are not developing our oil, there are so many billions of barrels still lurking in the deep water terrain of the industry, not to talk of some of the frontier basins. So now that we can now work assiduously in promoting the business in the industry, I believe Nigerians will now heave a sigh of relief that at last there's no uncertainty that is constraining development of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria.
All right, thank you so much, Chief Diran Fawibe. Well, the question is, how will this new regulatory framework work? Because this bill also throws up sort of like another regulatory prison around, sort of like a regulatory gulag here and there, the NNPC becoming commercialized, upstream regulator, downstream regulator, NAPIMS and the likes. I mean, how is all of that going to work? Because that is the meat of the matter. That is what will bring the investment in. Yeah, you see, when there was a major reform in the industry in the 70s, NNPC was a product of the merger of NNOC and the Ministry of Petroleum. The Ministry of Petroleum was at that time abolished. We used to have a very strong Department of Petroleum Resources, which at that time was actually including electricity and so on. But with the abrogation of with the merger of NNOC with NNPC, the Ministry of Petroleum was no more in existence until later in the 1980s when the Ministry of Petroleum was brought in through the back door. Now, NNPC now became the octopus, like many people used to derisively describe NNPC, which was then handling both commercial and policy. Policy normally used to be handled by the ministry, but the fathers of the industry at that time that abrogated Ministry of Industry was not without a reason, because there were a lot of rivalries, competition between NNOC and the ministry at that time. And given the fact that there was a... what is this NNOC? NNOC is Nigerian National Oil Corporation. Okay. We now have NNPC. It's just a change of oil to petroleum. The basic issue was that there was limited manpower resources to develop the industry. So in order to harness the executive manpower at that time, both technical and non-technical, the two organizations were merged into one. So NNPC now became the organization that was responsible first for making policy, also for, to some extent, regulation, even though we have Petroleum Inspectorate to start with, and then later became Department of Petroleum Resources. But essentially, the NNPC was not handling commercial activities as it should be. No, we will see now in the new arrangement, NNPC Limited, which will be a limited liability company registered under the Company and Allied Matters law, will now be different from what NNPC used to be. So in effect, NNPC will now concern itself only with commercial activities. Now, the regulatory agencies created, under this law, will now handle both upstream on one hand, and midstream and downstream on the other hand. So this arrangement appears to be neater than before, but it also depends on how we handle the implementation of the bill, because as you know, we know who we are as Nigerians. Because like somebody was telling me recently that if you want to make a new start, don't think about the place you are, think about the mindset. It's the mindset of the operators. Even when we talk about Nigerian constitution, we could still get something better than what we are currently having if we have a totally different mindset from the operators. So what I would even suggest at a point is that we should now try to do a enlightenment program, I won't call it training. We should now bring stakeholders, and government agencies, and apart from those who are from those in the oil and gas industry, customs, the immigration, everybody that will have anything to do with the oil and gas business should now be brought together, and a sort of seminars, workshops should be run in such a way that when it comes to implementation of this law, the fine provisions there will be implemented for the benefit of the industry and the Nigerian economy. So the international investors will now have confidence, not just in the paper, but in the way we administer the provisions of the law. And that is the only way we can derive benefits from the bill.
Well, Doctor, thank you very much. Definitely the Petroleum Act of 1969, there were too many gaps, particularly with regard to governance. And as you said, this new bill will create a new governance structure. But what then happens to some of the departments of NNPC, say like NAPIMS, for example, and what will be the nature of the new regulator? And then another very important part of this bill is the powers of the minister. If you could just help us shed some light on some of those issues.
One of the issues that has created problem with the bill over time was the power or the role of the minister, the power to be assigned to the minister. Some people were saying that the minister was given too much power under the new law. But I think when we go into the details of this, what has come out in the bill, we'll now be able to see the plus and the minuses as far as the power of the minister is concerned. But essentially, the minister will still be responsible for supervising the operation of the oil and gas sector, both the NNPC and the regulatory agencies, that is the Commission and the NNPC Limited, because after all, the shares of NNPC Limited will be vested even though it's being held by the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, but it still be under the general oversight of the Minister of Petroleum, because the Minister of Petroleum is the intermediary between government and the petroleum sector and all that have to do with the petroleum sector. Now, in terms of the NNPC, as is stated in the bill, all the staff of NNPC will now move to NNPC Limited. And I think this will also include that of the NAPIMS and the various departments of NNPC and so on. Now, when it comes to there is a provision in the bill that there will be subsidiaries or NNPC will be free to incorporate joint ventures. I'm just wondering what is going to be the fate of the companies like the refineries, because they are subsidiaries of NNPC under the present arrangement. I think this will be coming under some of the subsidiaries that NNPC will now have to
to handle, because it will be a voluntary JV. Now, when it comes to there are still some other organizations, like, for example, the upstream Petroleum Authority, will be responsible for regulating the upstream sector. And then this, I believe, would not take part of the functions that is currently being handled by NAPIMS. And as you know, if NNPC is a limited liability company, then we'll now have to look at the assets of NNPC under the present arrangement that will now be transferred, into NNPC, either in form of winding up the assets of NNPC. Now, these are 5 points of the bill that will now have to be dissected, and then so that a tidy arrangement for the transfer of interest of government. But as you know, hitherto the issue of Ministry of Finance Incorporated has been on the card in terms of holding government interest in some of the existing operation of the industry. So, to a larger extent, all the interests of government, either in Shell or in Chevron, and so on and so forth, will now have to transfer to Ministry of Finance Incorporated, which will be the agency of government managing the interests of government in this instance.
All right, we have a minute to break, and I'm happy that you talked about that, because, I'm beginning to think what happens to the likes of SPDCs of this world and other, JVs, and also what will now be the fate of product sharing contracts, that has been on for a while. And, is it realistic? We say we're setting aside 30% of OPEX to look for new frontiers as regards oil. Those states were not mentioned. A lot of people are saying we have disputes as regards land on ground, and those states are not mentioned. So that clause is quite very nebulous. I mean, aren't people going to make incursions on their land in the name of exploration? I mean, if you go back to Oloibiri, a lot of people said their family land were taken in the name of exploration. No amends have been done till date. I mean, all of that gamut. And mentioning Oloibiri, I also want you to talk a little bit about the host communities. It seems that they didn't get a good deal. Some are saying the deal is not good enough for them. I mean, we'll go for a quick break. We'll untangle all of these issues. So We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We're still talking to Chief Executive of International Energy Services Limited, Dr. Diran Fawibe. We're talking about the whole gamut of the PIB that was passed on recently. Dr. Fawibe, I mean, I did ask some questions about, host communities, SPDC product sharing contracts, and this new frontier we're looking for, because it's quite nebulous. Nobody's talking about the particular states. We've had a political history in this country where some people have said bills like Ruga or the water bill was to take some land. And people's land going to be taken under the guise of exploration and the likes of things like that. So just help us unpack it, sir. Okay,
so first of all, let me say this, that as is stated in the bill, all the mineral resources of this country, as it was in the previous legislation, is vested in the federal government of Nigeria. So there is nothing that is totally different in the bill from what it used to be about the ownership and control of the oil and gas resources in the country. So now, whether we are talking about whatever the level of water depth, whatever the extent of the oil, even into the offshore, so this has been clearly defined, in the new legislation. So there won't be any ambiguity as to who controls what and who has interest of the oil and gas revenue coming from the oil resources. Now, in terms of the host community, substantial part of the legislation has been devoted to tackling the issue of host communities.
Now, one of the areas that the National Assembly will say have to harmonize their position is the percentage of interest that is being assigned to the host community. As you pointed out before, the Senate passed, first of all, from the executive, 2.5% was coming from the executive. Eventually, the Senate passed 3%. House of Representatives passed 5%. So I think, I don't think it requires the wisdom of Solomon to be able to come to a conclusion as to what will be the percentage that will carry the day. I would say that, personally, I would be in favor of 5%, but that is Fawibe's personal inclination. But whatever is granted the host community, what is key is how this money or the fund accrued therefrom is administered. Like my late friend, older friend, she definitely used to say during the era of resource control, he said that, why are people agitating for so much when the little that has been given to them has been misapplied, has been mishandled? In other words, I've been in the industry for a long time to know how much has accrued to the oil-producing communities. I can say it without any fear of contradiction that if these monies have been used judiciously to manage the problem of Niger Delta, the situation today will be totally different in terms of the landscape. Whether it is 3%, whether it's 5%, together with some other interests that will be coming, because in addition to the whatever percentage is approved, there will be grants, honoraria, as well as donations. Don't forget that the 13% derivation is still there. So all these things will accrue to oil-producing communities. But the bill says that there will be a trust to be set up to manage the resources that will be coming to, that will be accrued therefrom, so that we won't have something like NDDC. Many of us, who as operators in the industry, we knew the whole situation under the era of UNPADEC. And you knew how the NDDC was in the eye of the storm, last year in terms of how the resources allocated to that commission was to be used to develop Niger Delta. So what in effect I'm saying is that if people of Niger Delta or people who have put in charge of managing the resources, if they will have the fear of God, although at times some people used to say politicians hardly have the fear of God, they have the fear of their stomach, they have the fear of themselves. If they use this money judiciously, whatever the percentage, we can change the landscape of Niger Delta. The people of Niger Delta have been at the receiving end for many years, for many decades. And if for once, people will rethink and see how they can put smiles on the faces of these good people of Niger Delta, I think so be it. So what in effect I'm saying that the bill has made provision in terms of the structure that will govern the handling the interests of the host community. So that has not been, a whole section of the bill was devoted to this as one of the key elements, Now, when it comes to the development of frontiers, basins, and so on, using 30% of the profit of NNPC Limited, as well as the of gas activities, where it's a debatable issue whether we should actually use this percentage, 30%, for development of inland basin, because some people don't actually have faith in the inland basin we are talking about, and I don't mean in some of the areas of marginal feed and so on. Some people feel that there's many other areas in the country that still have presence of hydrocarbon, and we need to devote some resources to develop. And since many of the investors, both local and international, will not be willing to put money there,
in the first place, because some of them have tried in the past without much success. So they will be very they will be very cautious, in putting their money there. So if that is the case, since every dime coming into the oil accruing from oil industry now will have to be accounted for. So the previous practice where NNPC can just be dishing money to go into exploration in some frontier basins and so on, without much of ice beating, that will no longer happen, because we are talking about a bill that is ensuring accountability, transparency, and good governance. Every dam has to be accounted for. And if NNPC is a limited liability company that will now be preparing balance sheet every year, will be filing with CAC, even though it's the shares is still be that of government, then the era of spending money for all kinds of activities will no longer be there. So to that extent, some money will have to come out of NNPC. But whether it's a 30% or whatever percentage, I'm not competent to say whether it is proper or it's improper. But the fact remains that some money has to come out. But let me say this. If enough studies are done to be able to determine the prospectivity of these areas, there could be some joint ventures that NNPC will be entering into, and then they will be able to fund some of these exploration activities.
We have just about 2 minutes to go. But you will recall that in 2018, the 8th Assembly passed what was called the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. We got to this similar stage in 2018, and the president refused to give his assent. There were issues, constitutional, legal, according to his spokespersons, concerns about the fiscal framework, concerns about the amount of commission that will be taken by the Petroleum Regulatory Commission. Do you think that the present bill that we are all saying has broken the jinx, has it addressed those concerns? And is there a certainty, if I may use that phrase, that the president this time will give his assent?
Well, I believe, strongly that if the harmonization is done by both houses of National Assembly and is presented to the president for assent, I think the bill will be signed into law. Now, I think some of the issues that dogged the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill had been addressed in this enlarged bill. So it's not a question of one part of the bill is now being presented, piecemeal. It's a comprehensive legislation. And I believe the presidency has input, in this final bill. And the statement issued by the presidency, which shows that the presidency is equally elated, with this passage of the bill. I think it will be a total disappointment if the bill is not signed into law. But I will put my faith in the fact that the bill will be signed by the president once it's cleaned up and then it's presented to him for presidential assent.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Diran Fawibe, for your insights as always. Thank you very much indeed.